forward, you know, having these conversations.
Well, I took a chance.
Yeah, it seems like nobody's here. Yeah, I see that.
Test, test.
You're looking sharp today.
Congratulations.
Oh, yeah, thank you. It's like I'm not looking sharp today. Yeah, I'm excited.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a fifth year senior in the context that started for 5 straight years. So 6 years. I mean, if he redshirted, I don't know if he did it, but he started for 5 straight years. That's one thing I don't like about even in his shoes.
Test.
Yeah.
Your records by allowing somebody, it's a bubble, right? There are only a couple people that are going to ever be able to. So.
That's gonna be.
But anyway,
But it's exciting to have that decision done.
yes, so, yeah.
Concentrate on basketball and wrestling.
Right. Everything wrapped up all right? Oh. Which one was he in proximity to the room when I was there? Oh, so the side I used to, yeah. Oh, yeah. Something like some vibe gives you this is the weak spot to take a room. And if you're comfortable there, you just right back to it. And you don't want that awkwardness of somebody else showing up. I was sitting here last time. It's like, I don't know, they're just looking at, you know what I mean? Like everybody picks a seat and nobody wants that awkwardness. Where we're gonna sit next to. Interesting.
Interesting conversation.
Yeah, Keanu just got recently. Maybe Jody. I ran into him some. Short agenda. We haven't had one of these in a while. Oh, you're gonna add some things to it? You're gonna add some things to it? It's not happening.
Thank you for your help today. How's Catherine?
Yeah. Yeah, Enderlin got thumped by 4 winds. Jake. Then they came back. Jake said, Jake just said they couldn't keep up with their speed. They just ran it run and gun. That was, he told me that in like the third quarter, so.
I don't know if you're aware, we don't have
He just asked me, how are the Gaston boys looking? And I said, sure. Yeah, but just going to Mayville and him bodying up with, he looks like a child compared to some random dude from Mayville who's a senior that's that size. Like we are gonna be, I mean, Boucher plays tall, but he's not tall. We're gonna be in big trouble. Yeah, so my brother said, hey, so walk the lane and they forced them to shoot for the shots. They fouled them, they couldn't make a screen goal and they couldn't make a further shot. My brother said, "Tim was better." And with it.
No, not at all. Might have really good time. That's pretty stuff.
At some point, you should have figured it out, right?
Hopefully some.
Yeah, you better get started now. Won't hold it against you.
I could sing a carol. Well, or not.
Let's go.
I got a couple emails that said, let's go on them.
Let's go.
I think Barry got enough O's on the article. I can't remember.
Here's blowing in the wind.
Hi, Don.
You've arrived.
You realize Let's Go is going to be this campaign, the same as Morning Eagle Best was.
Yeah.
Oh,
The thing, right?
what did you call it, Barry? The model, the moniker, the something? Let's go. The motto. What's a motto with you? Which reminds you, be careful, choose your words carefully. It might last longer than you
My favorite
expected.
was Stacy, plug your ears. I'm doing it anyways.
Well, I did it one night and it was a little louder than she expected. All right. As soon as Dawn comes back, we'll get started. Here's this. Davis, this is not on the agenda. You're gonna bring it up. Where are you putting it? Oh, got it.
Not to be confused with number 7.
Oh, is there number 7?
No.
All right. I called the regular monthly meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Fargo Park District to order for the month of December. Consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion about the consent agenda? Dave, please pull the board.
Commissioner Deutsch,
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan, Commissioner Rosted,
Yes.
Commissioner Dawson.
Aye, motion carries. Regular agenda.
Nice work, Paul.
Dave, anything to change or add to the agenda?
Yes, Madam President, we need to add one item, and this relates back to our developers agreement with Sanford as it relates to the sports complex. We passed the developers agreement on October 18, 2019, regarding land for the sports complex. And what we found out during the closing process for this land swap with Sanford is that we need a resolution approving the land swap. So we'd like to add item number 6, board to consider approval for resolution, the land swap with Sanford for the sports complex.
Okay. Item number 6. All right. Item number 1, recognition of audience and public comments. I'm going to read this statement. At this time, the board will hear comments from the public. We ask that each speaker who has signed up to address the board come up to the microphone and state their name and address for the record. We would also ask that the speakers refrain from using this forum to criticize or complain about a specific employee by name. The board is interested in your comments and will listen carefully, but is not obligated to respond to or debate issues in this forum. Should you desire a written response to a specific question, you may request it. This evening, each speaker will be allotted a maximum of 3 minutes. And as a point of order, if any speaker wishes to talk later in the agenda, comments are limited only to the agenda item at hand, and speakers must first be recognized by only the Fargo Park Board President before coming to the microphone. Otherwise, the speaker may be ruled out of order and additional measures may be taken up to or including removal from the meeting. The Fargo Park Board President, however, does not have to engage in dialogue with the additional speakers. We ask that you respect this request and act accordingly. So I believe we have a couple of gentlemen who would like to come up and speak. So if you want to just one at a time, come up to the podium. Dave, are you my timer?
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you.
I'm president of Park Board, Thomas, Fargo resident. I'm speaking for myself and for the several hundred park position. Asking that we parks that we did. We know one thing for certain, park not feel safe. This year, the mayor asked to base into the have a stable effective or not. Safety that the data over the last 15 years by the and also state commission decided to do another study to look into safety, and they formed a committee. The committee not deal with safety. The city commission voted to discontinue the program, but on the second vote, they decided to into again the program and continue for next 90 days. So on this one, that the city could be overrun with beer and then maybe motorcycles could hit beer and number of factors were brought up to scare folks. There really is no data to support this, and your count based on the 100 on the river is not a scientific study, so we don't know what is. One thing for certain, and that is that the people who are still comfortable safe are. There are a lot of alternatives to beer problems. One is eliminating beer feeding, fencing for people on their plants, and other things can be studied. Part of the nature parks provide enjoyment for thousands of park stores at a very low cost. You may even say that you get most bang for the buck from the park system with the nature park system. So we urge that you continue to build on what you have, improve nature parks, add more trails, put in wildflowers, benches and such. But remember, this is a position, and many people use the parks. Not one. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jerry, do you want to, maybe he could stand there and you can just scooch over? Does that work? You could go to that microphone, sir, if that works.
Maybe she's getting another one.
Just putting batteries in it. So we can wait, or you can stand there if you want. Maybe Jerry wants to scoot back.
Test, test.
Very good under pressure. I'll see you on Christmas morning when we're putting batteries in all the toys.
Did you want my address?
That would be great.
Okay, I'm Christopher Cohen. I'm a Fargo resident and I'm at 337 10th Avenue South. So it's clear that the park users don't want deadly weapons used in the parks. Just from the petitioning that we've done, we got almost 400 signatures. And now the city, 3 of the 5 commissioners want to end the program. Now they've given 90 days more to look at everything again with the same partners, including the park district. And none of the basic facts are going to change. Nobody wants to administer the program anymore. So I think that the program is going to be ended. But as far as the concerns about what else we can do with the deer to control them, I want the public to know that the simplest thing, we haven't tried the simplest things yet. We haven't educated the public about not feeding the deer, which is one of the most important things. And we haven't talked to them about using barriers where necessary. Some people have expensive landscaping or their particular vegetable gardens are eaten each year, and that would be a great place for fencing. And then there's also repellent sprays, and it's best to use like 2 or 3 different kinds because the deer can become used to one type. And these are things the public doesn't know about. And there's also scare tactics you could use. And as far as, but I talked to one of the foresters in the park district here, and he said there wasn't a problem with the deer eating the new plantings in the river parks. And he hadn't heard any complaints from nearby residents and homes of nearby residents. So it's not clear to me that there really is much of a deer human conflict in these areas. There's lots of talk about it, but I can't find any data. In addition to, there are periodically collisions with deer and vehicles, but again, we haven't tried the most simple thing of putting up signs in areas where there've been multiple collisions, signs that say deer crossing. So, and reminding people to not go over the speed limit, because that's what's involved here is speeding when people hit deer. And you can educate the drivers, but you can't educate the deer. So that's what the North Dakota Highway Patrol says. And I just want the public not to worry that there's nothing else
30
that can be done
seconds.
other than a kill program, because with the kill program, it only took out about 24 deer on average each year, and that was not enough to make much of an impact with the 500 deer locally that were counted in the censuses up to 2013. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Anyone else? Dave, you signed in. You sure you don't want to come up? Okay, absolutely. Item number 2, director's report.
Commissioners, we have several items we'll cover, and I'll take the first 3. The items I'm going to cover are an update to the sports complex, an update on our comprehensive strategic plan process, an update on FMCT. Then Carolyn Bowe will give an update on Island Park Master Plan.
So it's like
Carolyn?
a team
Oh.
effort? Like the head and the tail or something?
Carolyn Boutain
Oh.
Kevin Boutain.
and Kevin Boutain.
You know what's funny? I didn't even catch it until you started laughing.
Yeah, as
Why is she laughing? Oh,
Okay,
And
and
he's Carolyn
Kevin,
and Bo.
Kevin will be covering an update on the Island Park pool design. So,
you guys have been together a long time.
yeah, I know,
It's like
all these
family.
bees. So anyway, just give you kind of an update. As you know, last week we opened bids for the sports complex, and kind of the initial review is they came in very good. Currently, right now, I did reach out to McGough, who is our construction manager, to see if they've had a chance to confirm all the low bids and if there was any mistakes made. They are still working on that process. They have come across some minor errors, nothing that's going to adjust the gross maximum price, but they want to be sure before they release that data. So some things we're going to work on, we'll continue to work with them. We have an owner, architect, contractor meeting, a couple of those set up over the next couple of weeks. We will be working with them to finalize that gross maximum price that will be presenting at our December facilities committee meeting. And, so we're going to work with them and see where we are for the low bid as compared to what we've set our project limit of 78.6 million. And we'll be doing some internal staff discussions. There are some things related to the turf and some other items that may be warranted to take just for the longevity of the project. So that's kind of an update on the facilities committee meeting. And then if everything works out, we'll take that to the January 11th board meeting for final approval. Does anybody have any questions related to the sports complex?
I have a question. I just remembered that some while back, there was a date that was set in relation to fundraising that would determine whether the full project was going forward or whether there was going to be a scaled back project. So I haven't heard anything about how the fundraising is relating to going forward with the full project. Oh, and you said the board would be meeting in January.
January 11th, yes.
Yes, okay. So is there any preliminary thinking that needs to go into this regarding fundraising?
Yeah, we're continuing our fundraising. We did have another donor, I guess, come forward last week. So we're continuing that process. The one thing we talked about with proceeding with bidding this project was what we kind of consider a bridge loan from the Park District to cover that gap, just so we could make sure we get in the ground of spring of 2022 versus 2023, which potential cost escalation of 10%. And on a project this size, that could be a $7 million savings. So we have identified alternate funding to get us to where we need to be to get going on this project. But ultimately, we want to continue fundraising to close that gap. So we do have that 50-50 private-public partnership. So
what is the bridge? What is the amount of the bridge loan?
The bridge loan right now we've identified is about $16 million. And so we need to have something to cover that so we can get going on the project, and then we'll continue fundraising to cover that. And as I mentioned, we've got some additional fundraising that's happened over the last week. We're looking at some of these alternates. Do we take all the alternates? Don't we take all the alternates to try to make up that gap? So.
All right. Well, one of the things that I remember too was that it was somewhat concerned that the Park District not be selling off too much of their holdings to go toward the sports arena. And I'm just concerned about the 16 million. I know there was a budget surplus, but it wasn't 16 million.
No, we do have some year-end funds that we're applying to that. Plus, we also have additional mill that we used for future projects. And last year's project that we identified, that mill was for the Lindenwood Road. So that mill became available for this bridge loan. And while we think this gets us to a starting point, we totally have confidence that we're going to fill that $60 million gap with additional fundraising. It's just kind of a fail-safe for us.
Okay, could I ask Brock how he views this bridge loan?
Sure. Commissioner Morgan, as we talked at a recent facilities meeting, we were looking for options and how do we find the ability to move forward with the project and try to save the $7 million. So certainly at the board's direction that we continue the fundraising. We do understand that we are using some reserves as well as the ability to service debt with existing mills, as David talked about, to just save the $7 million in escalating cost. And so I'm comfortable that we have a plan put together that will help us close that gap from a fundraising perspective, as well as allow us to get the project as it exists today at a price tag that's 7 million less than it would be a year from now. And I think that's being good stewards of the public funds. And so I am comfortable in that regard. Certainly, it's going to take a lot of work by all of us to continue the fundraising efforts and try to close that gap. But the plan that we put before you and that was accepted by the board is one that the finance team and myself feel confident that we can deliver on.
So the fundraising then, and you're probably not the person to ask, but how far long is that going to continue? It'll be after, of course, after the bids are in, construction begins, but how do you see that as going forward?
Yeah, Brian can probably speak more directly to that, but it will take, there's really several phases. One is it will take until we get to the level of a minimum of a 50-50 partnership or greater. But the reality is it will probably continue long after that as we think about additional amenities. And Brian has certainly more specifics about that.
Yes. Yeah, my thoughts are that fundraising probably is going to be what we're going to be doing, to make projects work. Certainly with respect to the sports complex, once we get phase one done, which is what we've all heard about, in terms of basketball courts and turf and walking track and that kind of stuff. Once phase one is done, there'll be a phase two. And whether that includes more basketball courts, pickleball courts, ice, the sports complex project probably will never be completed. When you look at ongoing phases, upgrades to the facility on into the future, fundraising is going to have to be a part of that for the park district to be fiscally responsible. Not to mention other projects the park district might do in the future. Whether it's Island Park Pool, which we totally expect to do some fundraising for, or other types of amenities in the park district. I just don't think fundraising is ever going to come to a conclusion. We're going to need to continue to partner.
Yeah, well, that's part of what the foundation does.
Right.
But it doesn't, to me, it seems like I would be looking forward to other projects. As you mentioned, that we don't want to get involved with something that's going to tie up all the fundraising into the future. Did you want to comment, Dave?
Yeah, I think as we put together this foundation, the strategic plan for the foundation, we're going to have capital campaigns, whether they're related to the sports complex, Island Park Pool, as Brian said, or they could be improvements to master planning projects of several of our parks that we're talking about, whether it's Island Park, Lindenwood Park, Yonker Farm, we've got Johnson Soccer Complex. So we're going to have all these additional capital campaigns, which I think the foundation is going to play an important role on. And while the sports complex is a large one, it doesn't mean you don't have a separate capital campaign for some of these individual projects.
Just one more question. Haven't there been funds put forward already for the master plans in 3 different parks?
We do have funds set aside for the master plans. We don't have funds yet allocated for improvements to those parks. So as we go through the master planning process, they will let us know the anticipated cost budget for those improvements, and then we'll have to, over the long range capital plan for those improvements in the park or capital campaigns.
Yeah. Just one more question. How are you going to create some kind of a ratio that will enable distribution of funds between some of the other projects that we'd like to do, incorporating the sports arena into that so that, we don't have a draw of only on the sports arena, but everything else is continuing on in its usual fashion of development?
Yeah, and I guess I would think that each particular project would have its own capital campaign, because you're going to have user groups and whether it's corporations or businesses that want to contribute to a specific, some might be arts in a park, some might be related to an amphitheater, something that, somebody might want to give to this project, but not this project. So if you throw it all into one capital campaign, it's kind of hard to divvy out. I think you'd have individual capital campaigns for each park or each project.
Yeah, I'm still wondering about how you're going to distribute that. I guess in definition, that's how it would be. So
the one thing we can do as a park district is use our general fund for park improvements and divvy that up or split that up between individual projects.
Thank you.
What do we got next?
All right, next up for myself would be an update on our comprehensive strategic plan. This is the one we are working with Greenplay out of Colorado. So we have our strategic kickoff meeting, and this is our first meeting. This would be a Teams meeting, not an in-person meeting, set up for tomorrow morning. And this will be with our directors group. And basically, some of the items we're going to cover in the strategic kickoff meeting will be discussion of roles, whether it's Greenplay staff, project coordination, identify the project, vision, critical success indicators, key issues to identify, final scope, work plan, timeline, and invoicing for the project, vision, mission, and values. This would be a trip that the representatives and the consultants from Greenplay would come up. Staff, strength, SWOT analysis, strength, weaknesses, and help me with that. Opportunities and threats. Park board effectiveness and roles and responsibilities, basically. So that'd be a second trip that Greenplay would come up and the board would be involved in that. And then their final trip up would be a presentation of the draft to our facilities committee or board meeting. So those are some of the things we're going to cover tomorrow. I do have a more in-depth, I guess, agenda that we received today that will be discussed tomorrow, and I can always forward that out to our commissioners.
What's the timeline, Dave?
The timeline, I believe it's probably a 4-month process, give or take, I would say.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, our last one that I will cover before I turn it over to Carolyn and Kevin. I did talk with Judy from FMCT. I stayed away from the last names. FMCT today, and she let me know that they did receive their insurance check for the damage on the roof, and they were very they were happy that they received the amount that they were looking for. Probably the majority of the building is a total loss, which includes the performance theater. Their plan right now would be to save the gazebo and a couple bathrooms and a couple offices on that north end, and they're working with their architect firm to see how that would work out as kind of an interim. And then what they would do is demo the remaining extent of the building, since it's basically a hazard and unsafe, and they would restore that back to park quality turf. And then once that's done, they're a stakeholder, so they'll be part of our Island Park master plan. And some of the things they would like to have us look at is FMCT a viable part of Island Park moving into the future as part of that master plan? And then another item would be a possible outdoor kind of amphitheater performance stage in Island Park. So those are two items that we would look at as part of the Island Park master plan. And I think in talking with Judy, they would still like to have a presence in Fargo. The way I see it would maybe the performance stage, the main performance stage, if it all works out. They would have their black box theater over in Moorhead, and then they would have some learning educational classrooms over in West Fargo. So I think that's what they're looking at right now.
And what's their timeline for demo and?
Well, they're going to work with
Cleaning.
their architect group to see how they can finish off, raise the existing building and have some type of section on that north half that includes offices and restrooms and the gazebo. And then they would use that gazebo for some of their practice and educational area. And I would assume, this is just me, I didn't get to the timeline with Judy, but they would probably do their demo starting this spring if everything works out, and then restore the majority of that area back to turf.
So is there a plan to, in the future, where turf was recreated to build, or is it going to remain park property?
Yeah, I think at this time we wouldn't get too intricate with the restoration. We wouldn't plant trees or anything there. We just restore it so it's a safe condition. Put it back to topsoil, plant some turf, and then and even if this master planning process identifies as that existing site as maybe that's where that theater needs to remain, then it would just probably be raised and and ready for construction. I can't believe they would have plans and everything done for construction this year. You'd probably have to wait a year if we were going to go back to that existing site. So I think it's just to get the building down, make sure it's safe, and plant turf there for this year.
Jeff, at what point do we have to change something with the agreement we have with them if they're on this much different footprint, or how does any of this work?
Well, if they want to move away from the existing footprint, that would go back to getting city approval and railroad approval because of how the park district got that land back in the 60s or whenever it was. So if it's not, if they want to do this outdoor amphitheater type thing and it's not going to be on the existing footprint because they only have an easement or the ability to be right where they are. That would require city approval, that would require railroad approval, just like when we went through this a year ago with them potentially expanding the footprint. As for anything else with regard to removing it, I would think as soon as we narrow down, as they narrow down what they want to do and what they intend to do, which would kind of be in part with the Island Park master plan, it's time to get an updated lease agreement in place because, the original lease was from the 60s or 50s.
Yep. So if they raise the building, the part of the building that's damaged and can't be repaired, and just have a small space with a gazebo and restrooms, then we just have an agreement for that.
Yeah.
If we allow that to stay that way, I'm assuming we aren't obligated to necessarily do that. And then all the rest of that would be green space. So that's no impact with city and railroad because that was specifically what it says is park space, right?
Yep.
And then a different part of Island Park would not necessarily be on that railroad piece of land. So then we would control that decision, right? Am I right there?
I don't know how much of Island Park in general is subject to this restriction.
Yeah, I think, and I don't have exact details, but there's an east-west dividing line that's somewhere south of the Y that was originally quadrant off into blocks for Fargo that the city turned over to us that doesn't have any railroad restrictions on it. But I think everything south of that Mason-Dixon line has those railroad restrictions.
Okay. So it could be that if we let's say we put an amphitheater up, which is still a park thing, we wouldn't necessarily have to go through those hoops if we're on a certain piece of land that's not governed, is that the right word? Governed by the railroad.
Yep.
Or need the blessing of the railroad.
Yeah, and just by looking at the lot lines of the YMCA, I would assume it's that south property line of the YMCA that goes west. Everything north of that would be those city blocks that were vacated and turned over to the park district that wouldn't have those covenants on there. Everything south of that would have the covenants.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think from my standpoint, we just need to stay on top of this so they keep moving forward. So we're not left with this condemned building sitting there for a very long period of time and
That's for the good of the cause.
and then get a contract signed.
Now that they have the funds, I mean, we have the ability to tell them that they're in breach of the contract or in breach of the lease. We could move to terminate it, and by the terms of the original lease, it's their obligation to turn it back to green space. But even if we went through that process and did all that, outside of court action, you can only force a person to move as fast as they're willing to move.
Mhm.
Outside of, I suppose, us hiring to do it and asking for compensation back. But again, you don't really want to just start doing that.
Well, I think it's in their best interest to get it done
Yeah.
too, because they can't move forward till they get that done. But I think we need to keep checking in with Judy and saying, okay, what's the date? What's the date? And
Yeah, and
get a date nailed down.
Because that lease agreement is obsolete, but we left it in place for the sake of the situation. But we had concerns long before any of this about things like shared snow removal in the parking lot across the street and that sort of stuff that would need to be addressed too.
And ultimately, we'll have that final say of however they would like to proceed. So it'll come back to us.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. In fact, I'd hope that they would be in communication with us as they think through things. I'd hate to see it come to, because I remember at one point in time, they came to us and said, here's what we're going to do. And it was this big, huge plan. And it was like, whoa, where'd that come from?
Yeah, it was more of a report, not a asking of any permissions.
Yeah, and we'll stay in touch with them as part of that master planning process. So we should be able to stay on top of things.
So Vicky just mentioned that if there is a amphitheater built, that it would be a facility belonging to the park district. I thought that the community theater had made a request for an amphitheater.
Well, I think that's one thing they would like to look at as part of the Island Park Master Plan. Is just one thing that we will look at is, does a outdoor performance stage or amphitheater fit into Island Park, and whoever funds that.
Well, and just to clarify, it was park with a small p, not a park is a big Fargo Park P. It was just an amphitheater in the park.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I didn't necessarily mean we would own it or they would own it. It was just, I know there's the thoughts of putting in an amphitheater. I was more on the railroad land versus land we don't have to worry about what we do with it.
Yeah, they thought about, an amphitheater for small performances or maybe the Fargo Symphony.
So is one of the options that they would leave the restroom and the gazebos and those buildings and just leave it that and not do anything else?
I guess I would have to confirm that. I think that's just in the short term. If they decided to, if say they stay there, they would probably tie it all back together. If they decided to relocate and that fit into the park, I don't know if there's a possibility that maybe that gazebo gets moved or maybe that gazebo just stays where it's at. So that's just something I didn't have a chance to ask Judy that, but we can find that out.
Yeah, one of the.
I think that's just short term though.
Two is that they are interested in spreading out. So they're in Moorhead now. They're planning on staying, obviously. They're beginning to develop programming in West Fargo. And then they also have their children's theater classes on Broadway. So they have locations, but they don't have office space in any three of those. So even if they didn't decide to build there, they would still need to have office space. So that could be what it is that they're thinking. They also had talked about the problem with parking there, and that it was a major problem for them, and that it was in the foreseeable future, nothing would change with that. So they have many things to consider. But it would make sense that they might want to keep the gazebo.
Well, the reality is if it's an office building, that's not the intention of that usage. So when
That
they-
wouldn't really
when-
fit the
yeah.
recreational purpose.
When they get to the when they make a decision on what's going to happen, now that they have a check in hand and they know they can demo and do what they need to do, we just need to keep
Yep.
asking and asking and asking on a regular basis so that we keep moving them forward so we can get that done.
Correct.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right. I will turn this over to Carolyn Botain.
Dave asked me to update you on the Island Park Master Plan. In October, the board had allowed the staff to put together a contract with AGL and RDG, the winning bidders in our venture here. And tonight we do have a contract to sign. And we do have from them a few dates that we're looking at for January and February. In the time period between October and now, they've given us a little bit more solid information about what they've been doing in December and what their plans are for now through May. And I've also connected with about 14 different organizations to have them participate in some way in the master plan as steering committee members, and also helping reach out to the public as we do our design work and those kinds of things. I don't want to specifically say the dates tonight because we haven't vetted them with anybody to see if those dates work for us. I know it works for them. But there will be some additional connection with the board as well to see how it works with your schedule and where the location is and all that stuff. So we are moving forward. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to let you know what I know.
And so you've identified 14 organizations. Do they all know they've been?
Yes,
Invited?
I've reached
They've
out
all
to
been
every single one
invited.
of them. They've given me a contact person at this point. Depending on the dates and the locations, they may be deferring to some of their other board members or other connections so that we have a representative there. Or they may do it remotely or via a survey of some other master. Because again, part of the proposal we got was both a virtual platform that public could engage in as well as in-person meetings.
And those groups would be, did you call them groups, organizations, would be community groups, user groups?
The majority
It's
of
a
them,
variety?
yeah, it's a variety of things. Folks that use the group, organizations near the park, neighborhoods around the park, and of course, across the community, different organizations that would have an investment in there. We're not looking to involve a whole lot more than 14, because as it is, it'll be herding cats. But again, our hope is that
We're
they would.
bringing in cats?
Squirrels, whatever might be at the park. But our hope is that, again, the engagement is there with the community so that they either do the virtual or come to the meetings for the planning.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so we had our first kickoff meeting for the Island Park Pool project last Thursday. We had stakeholders, Britt Selbo from the Y, Kaylee Mork from the CVB, Brian Tui from the FM Gators, he's the VP out there, as well as Commissioner Griggs. We talked extensively with Brian with the meets that the Gators would have, whether that's state, region, or national meets, and kind of what they would need for amenities at the park if we're going to go down that road. Obviously, everything banks on that, the $16 million conversation, but some of the other things that we talked about is really with pool systems, construction, whether it's a concrete or a Murtha pool, similar to the construction project out at Hulbert. Filtration systems, sanitation systems for operational efficiencies with staffing, site conditions that are down there, bathhouse configuration, whether that's a year-round bathhouse with opportunities to add programming outside the park and outside the pool area. Still working on the parking study that would be down there. So we had a bunch of staff that were also involved with the process. Kind of the timeline for everything right now. So working backwards. So September, that first week in September, we would look to do the demo of that pool after the pool closes for the season. Construction documents, we'll look to have those completed around that June of 22 timeframe, and then design development around that April of 22. So working back, obviously the placement of the pool is a big deal. So as Carolyn talked about with AGL, we're kind of waiting for them to have the concept of discussions of master plan. So we should have that probably by that end of January, February timeframe to have that placement of that pool. So that would be the update for the first meeting. We will have right now designated one public meeting. That would be kind of a I don't know, cafeteria meeting where they would have different design features around, and the architects and engineers and design team would be there to answer any questions that they would have. So.
And Kevin, are we looking that if FM Gators or somebody else decides to rent the competitive pool and use the pool for meets and other things, that the other parts would be available to still be used to the public?
That is correct. We also looking.
Which is different than we have now.
Correct. We also looked at the possibility, depending on what amenities are picked, of keeping that pool, whether it's a splash pad or the zero entry, that we could keep that open longer than the typical pool season and maybe start it earlier depending on the staffing requirements we got.
See, now we lost my guy that was going to ask the question. So the splash pad would also potentially be lifeguard free.
That's correct.
So longer season, less labor costs.
That's correct.
Like it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, less risk. My blank. I was going to ask a question. I'll come back to it when I think of it.
Okay, sounds good.
Elder moment, I think. Oh, I know. The Gators, do they hold meets there now, or is the pool not adequate to hold meets?
Nope, they hold them right now. They have to modify the starts because it's not deep enough. But, we would obviously look at both ends of that being deep enough so that whether they go east or west or north or south for those meets.
And how many meets do they have usually?
2 meets right now, but they're looking, depending on if we can do it, maybe we, with the high school season, maybe they have that meet towards the end of the season outside. He talked about that being kind of a neat ability to have a pool meet outside for the high school teams, because obviously those are all inside, but typically that 2 to 3 meets that they have. They talked about bringing back the meet where they would block out, they blocked off, and I forget what the north-south road is right next to, is that Fourth? Fourth?
7th Street?
Seven, where they blocked off, sorry. Where they
Sorry.
blocked off 7th Street, like during the street fair, and then the Red River Open for tennis. So it'd be very festive down there, so they talked a lot about that.
From my understanding, when I talked to some Gator people, and I think Brian might have even been one of them, there are certain rules for holding a state meet and a regional meet, and it has to do with cool down and entry, and so that's part of why they're included in these conversations of, because they can't have host those meets now
That is correct.
because of the way the pool is.
Yep, that is correct. But we could design it into the concept of whether it's the lazy river concept, if that's part of it. But, you know, one of the concerns we have from staff is guarding those. So obviously a highlight of what we're looking at is maybe sight lines for managing the pool with the guards. So that's a huge wish list on our part.
Yeah, I think the other thing with the Gators and tournaments is there are some people who don't want to come here for a meet when you can't dive in to start, and they have to start in the water. So there will be a better draw if we have a pool that works better for competitive swimmers.
That is correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, directors.
Are we done with number 2?
So before we go to Brian, which I'm waiting eagerly to hear, was it just me, or when Richard was talking, did anybody else catch his statement? You were talking about deer management, a more bang for the buck.
I wrote it down.
I thought that was pretty good.
You get the most bang for the buck in the park system.
That's right. I liked it. That was good. I had to call that out.
Love it. Yep. Guest speaker of the month with the best quote of the month. Love it. Okay. Anything else for director's report? Any other questions or anything? Okay. Number 3, foundation director's report. Brian?
Yes, Madam President. You all were at the partners event last week, so you got to be a part of that excitement, that announcement, the rollout of our capital campaign, the public aspect of the capital campaign. We actually got a pretty good bump in terms of donors following that event, including an announcement that we're not at liberty to make yet, but that's pretty exciting in terms of a grant match and dollar amounts that have been dedicated to the project. So more on that later. Foundation board is meeting on Monday, so on the 20th. We will be talking a little bit about the strategic plan for the foundation, capital campaign for the sports complex, so an update on that. Talk a little bit about our efforts at zeroing in on the chamber of commerce list that you all have responded to, given us your information on. The foundation is going to be part of Giving Hearts Day again this year. So an update on the Giving Hearts Day campaign, and probably using the donation that we received last week as a match for the Giving Hearts Day efforts. And then we're going to talk about the first round for 2022 for the grant match program. So that's coming up again. Applications are due by January 1st. We have received one so far. So hopefully there'll be a few more of those that will roll in. Dollar amount that we think we are at liberty to dispense, it's at your discretion, but it is $50,000. So we'll see. We've only gotten there one time in the history of the program.
When did you say the deadline is? January 21st?
January 1st, applications
1/1.
are to be submitted by January 1st.
And one organization can get a matching grant up to what amount?
Maximum amount is $15,000.
And is the application you have from someone who's already applied or someone new?
The application is from a applicant that has received funds in the past.
Okay. So is there any plan or efforts on how we're gonna get the word out
We're going to do kind of the normal process. So there'll be a press release, or information release to the media, posts on social media,
Okay,
Facebook, Twitter, those kind of things.
okay. And would the Valley Senior Services Director like to promote Meals on Wheels?
He would. So Valley Senior Services, we are in the process of delivering gifts from the Secret Santa for Seniors program. About 250 applicants throughout the region, maybe a little bit more than that are receiving gifts this year. So we're just, everybody's all hands on deck are delivering. We said, let's go, and we're delivering the presents.
Santa Claus.
Second, our Christmas meal is going to be a week from tomorrow. So that is the 22nd next week. You know, and it's exciting to be back. I mean, during COVID, of course, we were closed over Thanksgiving and Christmas. We did about 900 meals for Thanksgiving, which isn't as many as we did before, but it's a lot of meals.
And you deliver those, just like you would
That's
Meals
the
on Wheels,
number
or
of
they come
meals
in?
We did at our meal sites.
Okay,
Meals on Wheels was on top of that.
is in addition to that.
400
Okay.
meals that way.
So December 22nd is Christmas dinner,
Yeah.
and they
Exciting.
all come into to the
Just
center.
looking for volunteers to help deliver Meals on Wheels, 293-1440. Takes about an hour.
I missed that. Can you give me that number one more time, Brian?
293-1440.
293.
That's all I have. Thank you.
1440.
You
Thank you.
have that now, Joe, 293-1440.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question for Brian. So the grant applications, which is the matching program, these are all programs that take place in the parks, is that right?
Yes.
So are they all existing programs, or are you open to new programming?
Certainly open to new programs. An example of that would be the story book project that the library completed last time. So they put up books along the trail at
Milwaukee Trail.
Milwaukee Trail. Thank you.
Do you have guidelines as to what new programming might look like or what may be prohibited?
You know, we have guidelines for what's acceptable for the grant match program, which are on the webpage, the foundation website.
Okay. Thank you.
And we ask anybody that wants to submit an application to just contact us, you know, so we can kind of run through the process and what's acceptable, what's not,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of pre-vet the applications a bit.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, patiently waiting over here. We have the Sertoma Club, who is our Lindenwood Lights group, and I'm sure so much more. So I don't know if both of you gentlemen are coming up, but if you'd introduce yourselves and tell us all about the great things you guys do. Thank you for coming.
We're waiting.
Yes.
Good evening. Well, I'm Daryl Vosvik. I'm a Sertoma member, and I've been a member for 42 years and was part of the project when we started 23 years ago.
Jim Wolfslegel, I've also a member for a long time, chairman of the board, and Daryl's the treasurer.
Yep. And we're the co-chair of the Holiday Lights. But like I said, we started Holiday Lights project 23 years ago. I believe Roger Gress and Dave was part of it, I believe, at that point. And we started out of was a small camper, freezing to death on those cold windy nights out there. But we started out really good with, I think probably was close to 10,000 cars that first year, even though it wasn't as huge as it is now. Over the years, it's kind of maintained its own, and it started falling down to like 5,000 to 6,000 cars a year. We've tried to reinvigorize the whole Holiday Lights. This year we have over 100 displayers. Last year we had about 16,000 cars go through. So we've been working very closely with Dave and over the years trying to get everything put together. Well, this year when you guys decided to put in your new little pathway through there. It created some problems for us because the electricity doesn't work real well for us now with all the paths and stuff that are there. So, and also we're getting older and we don't have a lot of newer members. So we're trying to figure out a way to make it easier to operate down there. So again, we worked with Dave and Dave, we worked with Excel, JDP Electric, and we came up with a plan, but the problem is it's a little over $100,000. So we've had several meetings, putting together the groups, trying to figure out how we're going to raise these funds. Excel did come to the table, and Tony Gernberg was able to carve out $35,000 for us. So that's got us on the path to getting it done the way it should be done down there. We're looking at trying to find maybe some boring companies that would work with us, getting this done so we don't hurt the roots of the trees or whatever. And that side of the project's about $30,000. So we're looking at that, and then we're trying to figure out the rest of the electrical components. So we put together actually a list yesterday of maybe we can reach out to some of these folks that might be able to help us with this project. So all in all, it's been kind of exciting, interesting to see who's coming up and trying to help us. And we're trying to make it go for many more years down there, but it is getting rather full and hard to keep getting that traffic flow going through there. I know Saturday night we had some trouble with the backside being slippery, and we had hired a new company because the streets department had worked with us for 23 years, and this year they cut us off. So we hired a new company, and he did not answer his phone, so we hired a new company on Saturday morning. But that's just part of the work that we do. We've been very fortunate on the funds we've raised. Last year, we gave out over $100,000 in the community, and totally in the past, we've given out a little over 1.3 million. We don't toot our horns a lot, but our mission for Sertoma is speech and hearing, so we try to work with organizations that deal with that, and one of our big ones is MSUM, Speech and Hearing Department. We've helped them buy tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment, as well as scholarships to the tune of maybe about $5,000 a year for graduate and undergraduate. So that's just a little bit about what we're doing, and appreciate all the help we've had from the Fargo Parks over the years. Any questions?
So all the work that you do and all the money you take in, you give away.
Right,
So everyone's volunteer.
that's correct.
And I have experience with you guys as part of the Boy Scouts coming and working with and helping with setup. And I've seen other troops there, and I've seen other service clubs there. And I
Yep.
think it's the community effort is great. And you've had a lot of young people who have helped get that going. And I know from my boys when we drive through there, hey, see those light bulbs on Dorothy? I changed those. And so I appreciate that not only have you guys put in the time and effort, but you've brought other people and organizations in to help learn service.
And I should take it back. It's not all volunteer. We do pay the ticket takers. We have 4 nonprofit groups that do help us with that project. And each one of those groups gets about $800 a year. And they also do help with some of the setup and takedown. And like you said, it's the Boy Scouts. We have help from the Moorhead State Collegiate Club, the Key Club, or no, the Collegiate and the Undergraduate Club, the Moorhead High Key Club. We've had the ROTC groups from West Fargo help us. Yeah. And this year we had the Optimists help us very much. We would not be here if it wouldn't be for them. They help us immensely. This year we had something very unfortunate happen to us. We shut down the park on Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. And when we came to open up on Thanksgiving Day, 5 of our major cords had been stolen at the park. So thank God, most of the stuff is LED lights. And we were able to run cords from the existing ones that were working, just with extension cords to keep them running over the weekend until JDP could come down there and round up the larger cords to get them replaced. So it's very unfortunate some of those individuals exist in this community, but oh, that's right. Yeah, we do collect food for the emergency food pantries, and we do support them quite heavily financially too. I think the last few years we've collected probably about 5,000 or 6,000 pounds of food a year. So we try to do what we can.
Well, we appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
The Sertoma Club is one of many service organizations in our community that just do outstanding things, and it's what makes our community great, to have the volunteer efforts that your group does and the money you raise and the money you give out. It's just awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, we're down to 12 members. So if you know of anybody.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for your patience and thanks for coming tonight. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah, and I'd like to ask Dave Beats here, just from the other perspective of kind of the engineering of the sensitive land in Lindenwood Park.
Can you repeat that, Don? I didn't
Yes,
quite
sorry.
catch that. No, you're fine.
I'm just want, you know, the commission has heard a lot about the new road in Lindenwood Park and the condition of the old road and the transitioning from one plan to another. And one of the problems, of course, was the weight of some of the RVs that were coming through there. And then also the traffic and the slubbing near the riverbank. And I'm just wondering how, if there's been an estimate done on how the plan that's going forward will be impacted by cars, you know, not just one, but, you know, if there has been any kind of impact study on motorized traffic in the park.
Yeah, we we didn't do any, you know, necessarily like a traffic study, or we have done in the past where there were traffic counts near the park, but never right into the park, to my knowledge. So we had some of that information, but the fact of the weight of RVs now is definitely part of the maybe expediting of the deterioration of the old road. Really, I think it was just a road that was, you know, way past its due to be replaced. It was built and constructed with not an adequate base underneath it. And so even with normal traffic, that road was just too close to the river and wasn't going to succeed. When we looked at putting in the concrete material, which will hold up to that sort of traffic, we quickly realized that if we tried to do that close to the riverbank, we would be losing more of the park than what we already do just from the asphalt. So those were the sort of considerations that we put in there. The new road is constructed to uphold to the weights of the current modern day vehicles, because even outside of campers and RVs, if we look at just our regular passenger vehicles, you know, it seems like most everybody's driving, you know, half-ton, three-quarter-ton, you know, SUVs and pickups in these larger vehicles. And, you know, 30 years ago, that just wasn't the case. So we did take those factors into consideration.
I'm sure it'll be an ongoing concern with all of the roads that are close to the river.
It certainly will. And, you know, I don't know if it was just a park district thing or that's just what was done, you know, 40 and 50 years ago when some of these things were constructed, but we're finding an awful lot of our asphalt paths and parking lots and roads that it doesn't have the adequate base underneath it, which, you know, there again, I don't know if that was the construction methods at the time or it was just thought to be we could just do that. But now when we do make replacements like that, we make sure we have our subgrade is adequate to withstand what we know today.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I could ask these gentlemen, but they're taking the old road all the way from, they're taking the same route that they've taken historically, correct? And will that be the plan in the future?
It will not. Once we, kind of finalize things there and get this electrical project behind us, the goal is that we will utilize parts of the old road for it, but then the new interior loop, they would basically have like a figure-8 pattern there, which would allow them to increase their displays by about 70% more than what they've already done this year.
Okay. And they're comfortable with that?
They are, we knew and we visited with the Sertoma group early on when we were talking about the impacts that this would have on them. And even before our road project, the amount of cabling and wire that they put in the park was immense. And so, we started looking at opportunities about how do we alleviate that, not only because, as they said, their membership is getting older and it's a lot of hard work, but also to make it safer and not have all of these cables strewn throughout the park.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.
Item number 5, board to consider approval and award bid for Rose Creek HVAC project. Dave Beats, right back at you.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, I apologize. We're skipping our normal meeting sequence on this one. This was not heard at Facilities Committee, which is typically our mode of action. The reason we're bringing this to you tonight is because of the length of lead time that it takes to get these units. So what you have before you is information about a bid opening that we had. This relates to a project we would like to do at Rose Creek on the clubhouse. This is actually the second time we bid this project. We did this not quite a year ago. That bid came in with numbers very close to what they are right now. So that's a comforting thing to us. The first time around, we didn't have enough money budgeted to make sure that this project would go. So we took that information we bid last time, we added more dollars in the 2022 budget to accomplish this project. And anyway, we did have a bid opening here just last week. We opened 3 bids, and the results of those bids are on the screen. The low bidder was Robert Gibbons Sons in the amount of $232,500. We did have a budget for this project that we had set aside that was $225,000. So this does exceed our budget, but we're planning to, if we get approval, we're planning to take the overage of that from our existing Parks Department budget. So meaning we will, we may not do a chunk of concrete here or there. We'll make adjustments within our own budget to make sure we stay within our overall budget. So that's it. What this project will do, it'll replace all of the heating and air conditioning units on top of the Rose Creek building. And the energy savings is significant. That's what really led us down this road. Basically, it's taking all of the units right now, our electrical units, and it's turning them into natural gas units. So we did a cost analysis, and Carolyn, I think I'm comfortable, was it right around $1,700 a month we were going to be saving? Do you recall that? At that time, correct. Yep, we did try and pursue a grant opportunity with this as well. Surprisingly enough, with the age of those units, which are well advanced in their age, we didn't qualify for the return on investment for that grant opportunity. So we're going into this thinking we know there's an upside to having natural gas. We know there's that savings. And we know the units are in need of replacement. So we're asking for your consideration for approval. And like I say, the reason we're bringing it here is we've been told there's a 6 to 8 month lead time on these units. Initially, we had hoped to do this project in the spring, but now we're going to push that probably till early fall before we would get this project accomplished.
How long do these usually last?
They typically last anywhere from 25 to 35 years, depending on a multitude of things from weather and maintenance and things of that nature.
And how old's what's there?
What's there is original. So that escapes me. That's a good question. I'm not exactly sure of their age. What was it, 92 that building was constructed? Or
There's
90?
30 years.
Yeah.
You don't want to wait till they don't work at all?
No. Preferably not.
Yeah, being proactive. And these bids are pretty tight.
They are, and we did confirm with the apparent low bidder, and their number is correct. Their lead time is correct, unfortunately. The units themselves are ready, but it's the heat exchanger that are within the units that are the 6 to 8 months out.
It's like everything you want to buy.
I'll
Okay.
make a motion to approve the bid as presented, the lowest bid, Robert Gibbons' son, to whatever that number was, to
232.
232.5.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Dave, please pull the board.
Commissioner Deutsch,
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan,
Aye.
Commissioner Rosted,
Yes.
Commissioner Dawson.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. Item number 6, developers agreement land swap resolution with Sanford.
Commissioners, as mentioned, we needed to add this to our agenda tonight. On July 15, 2019, the board approved the developers agreement with Sanford for the Fargo Sports Complex. As part of that agreement, the Park District agreed to transfer 160 acres of property owned by the Park District to Sanford in exchange for the Park District, or in exchange, the Park District would receive approximately 100 acres and $343,000 in addition to that. Both these properties have been appraised, and that was the difference in the value of the properties. The Park District and Sanford are prepared to close the land swap. This was brought up while we were trying to set up closing, and hence the need to bring it to the agenda tonight. So pursuant to North Dakota Century Code 10-49-12, the board must pass a resolution by a 2/3 vote to authorize the president and clerk to execute the deed transferring the land by the Park District to Sanford and vice versa. The attached resolution authorizes the president and clerk to execute the deed to complete the land swap. A sample motion for this would be, I hereby move to accept the resolution as presented to the boards. So myself, our finance director, or our attorney will answer any questions that you may have. This was all just, as I mentioned, discussed in the developers agreement that we initially agreed to with Sanford, and then an additional amendment to that agreement. So it's all
So it's just
common knowledge.
tidying it up
Correct.
so we don't have to worry about it later.
Correct, yeah, so this will get recorded along with the deed to prove to future people that if they were to do a title opinion on it, that the board by a 2/3 vote approved this transaction.
Okay. Does anybody have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the land swap.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. Dave, please pull the board.
Commissioner Deutsch,
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan,
Aye.
Commissioner Rosted,
Yes.
Commissioner Dawson.
Aye. Motion carries. Any further things for the board?
None from our group.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Thank you, commissioners.
Meeting adjourned. Kara, can I sign this one? Okay.